I don't know when it happened exactly, but at some point, my kids just stopped coming by. I used to hear from them once a week, maybe twice. A call here, a quick visit there. Holidays were still a thing. Christmas, Thanksgiving, someone always showed up with a pie and a smile. But lately, it's been dead quiet. I sit in this old recliner. Same spot every day. By the window. The mailbox is right outside. I keep thinking maybe today there'll be a letter. Or maybe someone will ring the doorbell. Surprise me. But it doesn't happen. Hasn't happened in months. Truth is, I raised 3 kids. 3. I changed their diapers. Worked 2 jobs to put them through school. Missed vacations. Sold my motorcycle just to cover braces and prom dresses. I even co-signed for their first cars. Don't get me started on that mess. And I didn't ask for anything back. Just, maybe a Sunday visit. A call on my birthday. I'm not bitter, at least. I wasn't. At first, I made excuses for them. They're busy, Dad. They've got their own lives now. That's what people kept telling me. And I believed it. I really did. Until I ended up spending my 70th birthday alone, with a frozen lasagna and a cheap bottle of wine. I waited the whole day. Had the phone fully charged, the table set for 4, just in case. Just in case they showed up with cake and candles like the old days. But nothing. No knock on the door. No call. No text. Just silence. That night, I sat in bed staring at the ceiling. And I realized something. I was no longer a part of their lives. I was just something in the rear view. A name on their birth certificate. That realization, it stung. I won't lie. It burned deep. Because I wasn't a bad father. I know that in my bones. I didn't drink, didn't run out, didn't lay a hand on him. I showed up to the recitals. I coached Little League. I stayed up late helping with science projects. I loved those kids with everything I had. But I guess, loving someone doesn't guarantee they'll love you back the same way forever. And that's the part no one tells you about getting old. It's not the aches in your knees or forgetting where you put your glasses. It's the loneliness. The kind that sneaks in, slow and quiet. Until one day you wake up and realize, you don't matter anymore. At least not to the people you used to live for. You become background noise. The kind of person they'll get around to visiting. So I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping. And I started writing instead. Not a letter, not a message, but a new will. Yeah, a will. Funny, right? You spend your whole life thinking about how to take care of your kids, and then you get to a point where you start wondering, who's gonna take care of me? I went down to the attorney's office on a Thursday morning. Same office I used years ago when I set up the original will. The secretary looked surprised when I walked in. "Mr. Reynolds, it's been years," she said. Yeah, it had been, and a lot changed in those years. I sat down with the lawyer, told him I wanted to update everything. I want to leave it all to someone else, I said. He looked at me, raised an eyebrow. Not your children? I shook my head. They're not around. They don't need it. But there's someone who does. He didn't ask questions. Just started typing. That afternoon, I named Mary, my neighbor across the street, as the primary beneficiary. She's been more family to me in the last 2 years than my own blood. She checks on me every other day, brings groceries, takes out my trash. Her kids even help me with the garden sometimes. And you know what? She does it with kindness, with warmth, not obligation. That matters. That night, I slept like a baby. No guilt, no regret, just peace. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I just wanted to be remembered by someone who actually remembered me. Before I was gone. Because if love only shows up after the funeral, it's too damn late. The thing is, my kids didn't know I changed the will. Not at first. They wouldn't find out until later. Much later. And when they did, oh, they were shocked. It was about 4 months later when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was a number I didn't recognize. But something told me to pick up. Dad? It was my oldest. Michael, the one who used to ride on my shoulders in the backyard, yelling, "Faster, Dad, faster." His voice sounded different now. Cold, tight, not like someone calling to check in. I heard. Someone said, "You're not leaving the house to us anymore. Is that true?" I paused. I could hear traffic behind him, probably on his way to lunch or some meeting. Not visiting. Just calling because he'd heard something. "Where'd you hear that?" I asked. "Does it matter?" He snapped. "We're your kids. That house is our legacy. You can't just give it to some neighbor." I let out a breath, slow and steady. "You mean Mary? The woman who helped me shovel snow last winter when you didn't answer your phone? The one who brought me soup when I had the flu?" Silence. Then he muttered something like, "You should have told us." I laughed. Not a mean laugh. Just tired. I tried. I called. I texted. I waited. But you were always too busy. Always. Next week. Always. Things are crazy right now. There was more silence. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask how I was doing. Just said, "Well, you should reconsider." Then he hung up. A few days later, the other two showed up. First time all three of them were together in this house in years. They brought coffee, Starbucks. Not the kind I like. They brought polite smiles, fake concern. "Dad, we just want to talk," my daughter said, sitting down like she was negotiating a business deal. I looked at them, suits, watches, expensive phones buzzing. They didn't belong in this old living room with faded wallpaper and the scent of worn leather. "You've all got a funny way of showing up when you think something's at stake," I said. "Dad, come on," my youngest said. "It's not like that, isn't it?" I asked. "Where were you on my last birthday? Where were you when the heater broke and I sat here shivering for 2 nights?" They looked down. No one said a word. I nodded. Mary was here. She brought a space heater and made me tea. My daughter leaned forward. "We're not saying she's a bad person. We just think maybe you're making a decision based on hurt feelings. You're emotional." That got me. Emotional? Maybe. But also clear. Clearer than I've been in years. "I'm not doing this out of spite," I said. "I'm doing it because I finally saw who shows up when it matters. I don't need your money. I don't need your approval. I needed your presence. And you gave me absence." My son stood up. "You're making a mistake. You're punishing us over a few missed visits." I looked him right in the eye. It wasn't a few. It was years. They didn't stay long after that. Said they had to get back to work, to meetings, to the lives that were more important than mine. As they left, I watched from the window, just like I used to when I waited for them. But this time, I didn't hope they'd turn back. I knew they wouldn't. And you know what? I didn't feel bitter. I felt resolved. I knew what I was doing. I knew who I was rewarding. And it wasn't about money. It was about love, time, effort. Who knocked on my door? Who remembered me when no one else did? A week later, Mary brought over banana bread. She didn't ask about the kids, didn't bring up the drama. Just said, "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah. Actually, I think I am." We sat on the porch that evening, watching the sun go down. She laughed at one of my old stories, and I realized I felt more like a father, more like a man, sitting there with her and her grandkids than I ever did in those silent years with my own. The lawyer called again. "Are you sure you want to keep the changes?" he asked. "They're pushing hard." "Let them push," I said. "I've already been pushed out of their lives once. I'm not letting them pull me back just for what I own." And that was that. 3 weeks after that last conversation with the lawyer, I started feeling it. the shortness of breath, the tightness in my chest that didn't go away like it usually did. I didn't tell anyone, not because I was scared, but because I was at peace. I'd already settled what needed settling. No more waiting by the phone. No more hoping they'd remember me before I was gone. I had one last thing to do. I sat down one evening, the sun just barely dipping behind the trees outside, and I wrote 3 letters, one for each of my kids. Not to convince them, not to explain, just to say goodbye my way. I didn't try to guilt them. I didn't list all the birthdays they missed or the calls they never returned. I just said I loved them, that I always did, and that I hoped someday they'd understand that love doesn't survive on blood alone. It survives on effort. Then I folded the letters neatly, sealed each one, and left them on the table by the front door. Mary found me the next morning. She knocked, like always, but when I didn't answer, she let herself in. She'd done that before just in case. She told the paramedics I looked like I was sleeping. And honestly, I hope that's how it felt. No pain, no drama, just stillness. When the kids found out, I heard they didn't come right away. It took 2 days. Maybe they had work. Maybe they were too stunned. Or maybe, and I'm just being honest here, they weren't sure how to feel. The funeral was simple. I didn't want anything fancy. Just music I liked, and no speeches. They sat in the front row, all dressed in black, looking like a family, but they hadn't felt like one in years. Mary sat in the second row, holding a tissue in her hand the whole time. Her youngest granddaughter clung to her arm. And I think that image alone would have said more than any eulogy. After the service, they went to the lawyer's office. That's where everything finally hit. I'd updated everything, down to the last detail. The house, the bank accounts, my old Chevy truck, even the safe deposit box at the bank. It all went to Mary. And they weren't just surprised. They were furious. I wasn't there to see it, obviously. But the lawyer later told Mary that my daughter stood up and shouted, "This is theft." He was manipulated. My son argued that I wasn't in the right state of mind. The youngest just sat there, pale, blinking fast like he couldn't believe it. But everything was legally airtight. Witnesses, dates, paperwork. No loopholes, no backdoors. Just the truth, signed and sealed. The lawyer handed them each one letter, the ones I'd written. He told them I didn't want them opened until they got home. I don't know if they ever read them. Maybe they tossed them in a drawer. Maybe they opened them and cried. Or maybe they read them and felt nothing. That's something I had to make peace with. I didn't change the will out of anger. I changed it because I'd spent the last 10 years slowly disappearing from their lives. And you know, I think part of them always assumed I'd be here waiting. Like I didn't have an expiration date. Like I'd just sit on that porch forever, waving at passing cars, just in case one of them pulled into the driveway. But time doesn't wait, and neither did I. I chose Mary not because she was perfect, not because she was family, but because she knocked, because she sat with me during rainstorms, because she remembered I was still here. And in the end, presence mattered more than promises. I left instructions to donate part of the savings to a community food program. The rest Mary used to help fix up her house, pay off debt, and take her grandkids on a trip. She didn't gloat. She didn't rub it in. She just said thank you, with tears in her eyes. I think she missed me more than my own children did. Weeks passed. The house was cleaned out. My clothes given away. My tools sold off at a yard sale. And just like that, 70-something years of life was reduced to a few cardboard boxes and an empty driveway. But I wasn't sad, because for the first time in a long time, I'd made a choice that was just for me, not out of guilt, not out of duty, just clarity. If any of my kids ever wonder why I did it, why I left it all to someone they once called just the neighbor, they only have to look back. Not at the big things, not the money, not the house, But the silence, the empty chairs at holidays, the voicemails that went unanswered, the birthdays I spent alone, that's where the real will was written, long before I signed any papers. I hope someday they understand. I hope someday they forgive themselves. Not for me, but for them. Because I already did. I forgave them long ago. I just couldn't wait forever. And now, I'm finally home.